Everyone. So I'm going to do some prep for a conversation I'm going to have later. Just because, I don't know, I need motivation to prep a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just ask you all to come along with me on the journey of trying to um, look at two of Heidegger's essays, the question concerning technology, and also on the origin of the work of art, because one kind of leads to the other. And yeah, so hopefully I can go through some of the passages that I've marked in this and just kind of practice articulating it so the conversation will be fruitful. This is just me being anxious about trying to remember, but also at the same time being lazy. So, okay. So thanks for indulging me. All right, so to summarize, Heidegger's thought on technology is that it could be both salvific and destructive, that basically, and I'm trying not to look at the text here and just recall this from memory, is that, we can't necessarily like extreme positions of either embracing and worshiping the evolving modern technology of our times, and then also demonizing it and wishing it away. Neither of those extreme positions are really going to help us have an authentic, fruitful, healthy relationship with technology where it allows us to be more than what Heidegger calls standing reserve. Heidegger has this suspicion that industry, that modern technology, and we've always had technology, even a stone grinding, the wheat for flour, that's a technological enterprise, right? But he's, talking about factories and locomotion and just various technologies of his time. And I think we can apply it to social media in our time. And he says that, once we have these machines to work upon the earth, we no longer see the earth as something creative and divine. We use it for our own needs, to satisfy our own needs. And of course, this also creates new needs as well, as we shift our focus and emphasis and daily tasks on different, we reorient those. And so what we do to nature, we also end up though doing to ourselves. So but this idea of standing reserve with nature, with the earth, is that we look at the earth as always just being there for our use, ready for our use. And that's what it is. The trees are there for when we need to cut them down. The water is there, the lakes and the oceans are there for when we need to transport goods and use, well, maybe not the ocean. I don't think ocean water is made for drinking, right? Just like lakes. But, using the water for my ignorance, using the water for our own consumption, using the earth for farming, and the landscape is modified so that we can get from place to place. And so we don't do all this at once. We take from the earth as we need it. So it is standing reserve in the sense that it's just being held for our use at a later period. And there is a danger that human beings, that both the ontological and the realized sort of understanding and actualization of our being and who we are will also turn into standing reserve. So this kind of means to me that maybe we are put on hold, who we are is put on hold until we can be productive. So it might even harken back to Marx's argument to the capitalist in the plea of the worker that we need to, the workday needs to be cut down from, in his time, 12 hours to 9 hours, to allow for replenishment so that we can continue producing labor, so we can maintain our labor power. So this is to convince the capitalist that the exchange should be modified and more fair to benefit both people, benefit both sides. But thinking like that puts work at the core. A particular type of work, so harkens back to Marx, because a particular type of work that always is geared toward profit and surplus. And so how would this be realized for us today? I think it would mean that, we go along our daily lives, but we put special importance of what we can put out there. Let's say if we were a content creator, right? So I'm reading books, I'm doing it, no one's watching me, I'm, doing it for my own personal benefit and because I enjoy it, because I'm an academic and that's my path, it'll always be resurfaced in the classroom for my students, etc. So it's just what I do. It's who I am, right? But if I have social media content where I'm posting pictures of books, there's a layer of that activity that is reserved, that is standing in reserve for the moment I take a picture of the book that I'm reading or going to read, put it on social media, have a nice filter, and I figured out a quote specifically for that post. So in a way, that doesn't mean necessarily that the reading of the book is no longer an end, but it's also definitely more a means to an end if I'm directing it toward my social media. And one could say, well, I mean, it's always both a means and an end because, you're just, one could say that I'm just trying to demonize a certain ends instead of others, because why don't I call out my reading and I know it'll eventually benefit my teaching and my lectures and my scholarship. I think though that there is a difference, a qualitative difference, because there's a difference in temporality, there's a difference in quality and depth of those ends. The social media is ephemeral, right? I post the picture, I get the views, I get the likes, and I'm done. I don't think about that anymore. It doesn't really grow in any way. It accumulates in a sense, in accretion by, the algorithm and the numbers. But reading for academic purposes and intellectual purposes and for the classroom lectures and scholarship, etc., has more of less a direct, I think, end. And it's also an ongoing end. There's not really, and then I can't help but thinking of Byung-Chul Han, his sort of like paternal voice in my head saying, why are you privileging not having a closure? But for me, I think that, I don't know, maybe there's problematic closures and like less problematic closures, right? And problematic never having a closure, and like more productive never having a closure, right? Like I just want there to be like that nuance available. So that's a caveat to justify my statement. So we can, and if maybe if we're not a social media, a content creator, okay, that's fine. Let's just go back to purely working our labor power. So if our leisure time no longer becomes, we're developing ourselves and we're becoming interesting people and we're making life worth it because we're pursuing our hobbies and our interests. If we're using our leisure time purely for the end of going back to work and being the best, laborer for our capitalists, right? So I think this is what Heidegger is worried about. But the salvific part of it is that I think technology can be utilized in order to help us understand ourselves and, bring ourselves into potentiality and into sort of an unfinished completeness, but in that, moving in that direction. So I think that would just kind of be, having a right relationship to technology. So Heidegger, so I think the point is, and Heidegger doesn't tell us exactly how to do that. I think that is the task and the responsibility of those of the readers, right? That's for us to realize that even in Being in Time, he doesn't tell us very, very specifically how to be an authentic person or even what we should resolve in our resoluteness, but he gives us that sort of basic template and foundation. So it would be, how are we going to use social media in a way that values and heads toward the priorities that we want to privilege, that we consciously and intentionally strive for. So for instance, I'll just give one example, networking in scholarships, so Chris Satoor is the philosopher that I'm going to talk to about this book or these essays. And we co-host a weekly or bi-monthly Twitter space where we kind of interview someone and we hold the forum open for discussion. And in hopes of trying to make it accessible, also trying to help various scholars promote their own work and discuss their own interests. Promote might be kind of a dirty word, but that is probably a part of it, for being honest. So that's very helpful. I would say that anyone who's ever had a long distance relationship and met someone in a different country through the internet would say that technology is really helpful in that way. That's not necessarily problematic completely, although I guess also if you were restricted to your own hometown to find a partner, then that also that doesn't mean you're not going to be happy, right? Lots of happiness for that, sometimes more, because you are not using a dating app and being super selective on the hopes that you can rationally make a choice about love. So we can argue about that, but still great relationships have come out of technology. Friendships, partnerships, love relationships, etc. So I guess the first quote that I see that I've underlined is on the second page of this essay. Thus, we shall never experience our relationship to the essence of technology so long as we merely conceive and push forward the technological, put up with it, or evade it. Everywhere we remain unfree and chained to the technology, whether we passionately affirm or deny it. But we are delivered over to it in the worst possible way when we regard it as something neutral. Okay, so that's the third, I guess, part that isn't the extreme, but being neutral or being indifferent and just letting it go. So Heidegger always wants us to be super active and intentional about who we are and life and others and our relationship. But mainly, I think reflecting on the self is what I get from the writings of Heidegger that so far I've read. So yeah, so I think that's so we have to be active participants in what we do with technology. And let's see, the next one, the manufacture and utilization of equipment, tools, and machines, the manufactured and used things themselves, and the needs and ends that they serve all belong to what technology is. So I think we can't get too distracted. The idea that struck me when I was starting this essay was that I can't really get too distracted with the material, because he always wants to go deeper and talk about the essence of, I guess, technology in general. And, you know, he's not only working on the surface understanding of what technology is or examples of technology. I mean, he's not even really ever concerned with examples, I don't think. Again, that's for us. Okay, so let's see. So he talks a little bit about causes and effects, being responsible and indebted. So let's, so he says here on, this is on my page 12. I guess this is second one that I want to look at. So I'm going to mark this. So there's one on 4. There's one on 12. Okay, so technology is therefore no mere means. Technology is a way of revealing. So yeah, I mean, I guess we automatically would look at technology as a means, right? My computer is a means to do my work, do my creator content, to talk to people. Like, I'm using my technology, I'm using my iPhone, I'm using my laptop, I'm using my microphone for other ends. It is not an end in itself. So the extra sort of idea that Heidegger adds onto this is technology as a way of revealing. So, you know, what does it reveal? For him, he's going to say it reveals that we're making ourselves into standing reserve, which he doesn't like. Let's see. So he says, as an example for the standing reserve of the earth, he says the earth now reveals itself as a coal mining district, the soil as a mineral deposit. He says, and yet the revealing that holds sway throughout modern technology does not unfold into a bringing forth in the sense of poesis. The revealing that rules in modern technology is a challenging. So I think he wants it to be a poesis, which I think he means, what is poesis? The aesthetic. Guess here's another one. The poetry, something that is sublime, think he talks about poesis a little. Okay, so he says before that in page 10, not only handcraft manufacture, not only artistic and poetical bringing into appearance and concrete imagery is a bringing forth poesis. So he says, so I guess he's using poesis as something not solely artistic, because he says physis, also the arising of something out from itself is a bringing forth poesis. Physis is indeed poesis in the highest sense. For what presences by means of physis has the bursting open belonging to bringing forth, the bursting of a blossom into bloom in itself. So he really sees technology, or the Techne, which I don't think he's defined yet. Maybe he has, I have to find it, as something that is really ushering us into a distinctive, meaningful era. And I think we could all, most of us could agree with that. You know, there's kind of, we passed the point of no return. Technology is here to stay. Some of us try to become Luddites, but you know. So he says on page 13 that, oh, so I think he starts to talk about Techne. I don't know when he first starts, but anyway, he says technology is a mode of revealing. In the realm, technology comes to presence in the realm where revealing and unconcealment take place, where truth happens. So Techne is, I think, defined as like a bringing forth. Techne is a bringing forth. Techne is truth. So when he says that it's a challenging, he says that challenging puts to nature the unreasonable demand that it supply energy that can be extracted and stored as such. So I guess there are different kinds of revealing and bringing forth. And one is unreasonably demanding. So he says on page 17 that everywhere everything is ordered to stand by, to be immediately at hand, indeed to stand there just so that it may be on call for a further ordering. Whatever stands by in the sense of standing reserve no longer stands over against us as object. Let me just make sure. Okay. Sorry, just had to check my messages. I want to make sure I'm like on time for the conversation. So obviously this is, well, obvious to some, I would think. This might be a problem because if we are just ordered to stand by, there are only in certain times in our day or our life, or do those moments count? Do those moments have value? And really, I think that for an authentic understanding and practice of ourselves, we stretch that meaning across continuously. You know, it's the idea that you want to make every moment count. You don't want to pause and put yourself on autopilot until you get to the meaningful parts. You know, I think if we are sort of protesting that our work, maybe for some of us, our work is not always meaningful. And so we are, as some song from the 70s, I think, says, I read it on a Target mug once, or a t-shirt. we're working for the weekend. I mean, that's not a fulfilling life either, right? Working for the weekend and putting ourselves on autopilot while we are, at our retail job or whatever job we don't want to be at if we don't want to be at it. But this is putting even those parts, it's kind of almost making an inverse, I think. It's putting which I think Mark was kind of doing in his Plea of the Worker. It's making our leisure time, our weekend, it's minimizing it even further. It's reducing our lives even further. I'll just say that. So I think this is a really interesting argument. And I think it's something that, people who are worried about technology will have already been worried about. But I think articulating this specifically in the concept of standing reserve is really helpful. And then he talks about, the complexities of concealment and revealing that there's always, well, actually, this is really interesting as well. His idea about concealment and mystery, it kind of brings to mind also the readings of Byung-Chul Han. I guess I read him a lot, when he says that, we can't rob our world of the mystery and the sacred and the divine to make everything be a product or a commodity or of use. That's what keeps relationships and people and work and everything sort of interesting and holy, is a little bit of mystery, which when Byung-Chul Han says this, I feel slightly uncomfortable because I feel like, what are we romanticizing and exoticizing and and all of that? Do we really? I mean, requiring that the other has retained their mystery for us, for our own pleasure, for the subject, the pleasure of the subject, and maybe the argument is for the good of the relationship. Which, all right, I don't know. It's just a little off-putting to me, but I think that that's his, by making something always a means to an end instead of an end. I mean, human beings don't want to be that, right? We don't want to be an end for somebody. No. Okay, sorry. We don't want to be a means to an end for somebody. I mean, that gets into the whole concept of being opportunistic and using people, right? They're a means to our end of success or financial stability or, whatever you can use people to get something out of. So we're doing that to the earth. We're also going to be doing that to ourselves. So why does doing that to the earth automatically mean doing that to ourselves and seeing that of ourselves? I don't know. I don't think he really talks about it, but he does talk about the mystery, and that's where he gets into, which there's a lot of essay to go over, but as just a preview, that's how he connects this conversation with his essay on the origin of the work of art. Because he says, because he looks at art as something that is just more naturally salvific if, again, we have the right relationship to it. And our relationship to it is that art reveals the essence of things. And so it reveals truth, but we have to be in co-creation or co-preservation of that essence. We have to allow it to come to fruition in our acknowledgement of it. So he uses the example of I guess, like peasant shoes. He says here in The Origin of the Work of Art on page 60, because it is in the nature of truth to establish itself within that which is, in order thus first to become truth. Therefore, the impulse toward the work lies in the nature of truth as one of truth's distinctive possibilities by which it can occur as being in the midst of beings. So this kind of bringing forth of truth is social. So preservation is kind of important in both the essay on technology and the essay on art. You know, I think that we're preserving this. I mean, I don't think he says it necessarily this way, but I think what he's kind of meaning is that we need to preserve the holiness of our lives and of creation and of nature. And we are an essential part of that. You know, we can destroy Earth, but we can also bring it into its own truth. Because he says on page 64 of on the origin of the work of art, so what is created cannot itself come into being without those who preserve it. Then he says on the next page, preserving the work means standing with the openness of beings that happens in the work. This standing within, all right, so in the technology essay, it's standing reserve. In the origin of the work of art, it's standing within a preservation is a knowing. And Techne is, I wrote something about this. I took this note. Where are we? Oh, I think it's actually in the art essay. In the art essay, he talks about Techne. Let me look. I said go to page 57 on another page. Okay, so on page 57 on the art essay, he says the word Techne denotes a mode of knowing. So it's preserving, it's creating, it's knowing. So going back to 65, yet knowing does not consist in mere information and notions about something. He who truly knows what is, knows what he wills to do in the midst of what is. So there's kind of a becoming, like an active becoming. Willing here referred to, which neither merely applies knowledge nor decides beforehand, so it's also a revelation, our encounter with salvific technology and our encounter with art that can do this, is thought of in terms of the basic experience of thinking and being in time. Knowing that remains a willing and a willing that remains a knowing is the existing human being's entrance into and compliance with the unconcealedness of being. The resoluteness intended in being in time is not the deliberate action, and I really appreciated this because it corrected my assumption of resoluteness in being in time, is not the deliberate action of a subject, but the opening up of a human being. So it's being, I guess, resolute to always be open, out of its captivity in that which is. So you see how I wasn't even ready to go to the work of art, but I had to go to it because I just find them so very connected. Let's see. Okay, so he also has an epilogue after. He says in the epilogue, I think it is. He asks a question. He says, but the question remains, is art still an essential and necessary way in which that truth happens, which is decisive for a historical existence, or is art no longer of this character? So it's not all art that he's talking about. And he said, and I guess he's implying that art can also be lost and not as easily standing within the possibility of salvation. Of course, I guess it's highly humanistic. Maybe it's not. It's salvation for the human being, but it's also salvation for the earth and salvation for art and our culture. And then he has an addendum as well. And I think that the ending of this addendum is really beautiful. Is it? Or maybe it's the ending of the technology. He mentions Holderlin at the end of the origin of the work of art. And I think it's really interesting. I recently discovered that Holderlin, who was a poet and a philosopher, was friends with both Hegel and Schelling. Like they were friends and they worked together, I think on like a pamphlet or an essay. And they just had a really strong connection. It's just so interesting, that time period, which I think Chris will be able to tell us about. So he says at the end he ends the origin of the work of art by asking, are we in our existence historically at the origin? Do we know, which means do we give heed to the nature of the origin? Or in our relation to art, since I really didn't talk about origins, do we still merely take appeal to a cultivated acquaintance with the past? For this either or and its decision, there is an infallible sign. Holderlin, the poet, I'm probably not saying his name right, whose work still confronts the German as a test to be stood, named it in saying, reluctantly, that which dwells near its origin departs. So then I guess, reiterates the need for mystery, which I know I haven't at all given a quote for. But if I find it, I will. Okay, so we still have a bit more time. If I can remember, I think I was talking about preservation. So let me find that. That's interesting. Here's actually another quote. 15. The setting upon that challenges forth the energies of nature is an expediting. It expedites in that it unlocks and exposes. Yet that expediting is always itself directed from the beginning toward furthering something else, toward driving on to the maximum yield at the minimum expense. And then he goes back to talk about the coal, which is stockpiled. So, okay. We did this one. He talks about inframing, which I think has kind of implications for what we can see, orientation, emphasis, importance. So he talks about God sinking to the level of a cause. Let me see if I can find his definition or where he starts to talk about inframing. It says, okay, so it is challenged forth by the rule of inframing, which demands that nature be orderable as standing reserve. And it seems, he says, it seems as though causality is shrinking into a reporting. And he reminds us on page 23 that we are questioning concerning technology in order to bring to light our relationship to its essence. And he says, it is from out of this destiny that the essence of all history is determined. Okay, so I'm going to read this next part on 26 and 27 because I underlined it. And when I underline most of a paragraph, I feel like I probably had a thought. Oh, and my comment is, ooh, chilling, ... the prediction. All right, so yeah, so this is importante, I think. All right, yet when destiny reigns in the mode of enframing, it is the supreme danger. This danger attests itself to us in two ways. As soon as what is unconcealed no longer concerns man, even as object, but does so rather exclusively as standing reserve. So it's not even that we're not looking at it as subject, we're objectifying it, we're looking at it as object. If we can kind of take it that far, which I think is maybe a bit of a diversion and unfair, but we are not even looking at it as object. We are looking at it exclusively as standing reserve. And man in the midst of objectlessness is nothing but the orderer of the standing reserve. Then he comes to the very brink of a precipitous fall. That is, he comes to the point where he himself will have to be taken as standing reserve. Meanwhile, man, precisely as the one so threatened, exalts himself to the posture of Lord of the earth. In this way, the impression comes to prevail that everything man encounters exists only insofar as it is his construct. So, so that is kind of interesting and chilling. It's kind of a ignoring of nature and an idolization of our own constructive ways. Which I think could be taken in the wrong way. But that is, I think, what he's saying here. Well, the wrong way, a problematic way for particular conversations. This illusion gives rise in turn to one final delusion. It seems as though man everywhere and always encounters only himself. And then later it says that enframing is one kind of revealing. It says, but enframing does not endanger man in his relationship to himself and everything, into everything that is. As a destining, it banishes man, that's an interesting word, into word choice, into that kind of revealing, which is an ordering. Where this ordering holds sway, it drives out every other possibility of revealing. So I guess that's why it's problematic. Again, it reduces and limits. Which reducing and limiting are not always problematic. But in this way, I guess it is. Above all, enframing conceals that revealing, which in the sense of poesis, lets what presences come forth into appearance. So there's no sort of, in this kind of use of technology that privileges the standing reserve and makes us into it, there's an ordering, there's a demanding, there's a challenging, there's a forcing. So when we're doing that, we're not letting things happen. We're not standing back and letting it go. Like, I think we can kind of look at the farmer pre-factory that, and well, he uses this example, I think. He says that, you know, allowing a space for the sacred in the earth, not just using the soil as fertilizer, you know, etc. There's working with the earth. You're working with the earth. You're folding seeds into the earth. You're watering as well the earth. You are helping water the earth. And then you're standing back and letting time and nature take their courses, and you are take their course. You're letting something happen. And when we let something happen and we're not always controlling it, then we open up God, or we open up nature, or we open up the evolution of the human species up to possibilities that we could not imagine. And we, I think, should have humility, if we don't, about the limitations of human reason. And so being able to step back and release control can allow something really beautiful to happen. All right, so I keep using the word salvific. So I'm going to read again. He looks at the words of Holderlin. I don't know. But where danger is, grows the saving power also. So there's always like this hope, right? And being in time, you're thrown, you can still be an authentic being. You know, there's the they with a capital T, but you know, you can still understand your own individual path. So he says, let us think carefully about these words of Holderlin. What does it mean to save? Usually we think that it means only to seize hold of a thing threatened by ruin in order to secure it in its former continuance. But the verb to save says more, and this is why I love Heidegger, what he does with words. To save is to fetch something home into its essence, in order to bring the essence for the first time into its genuine appearing. So he says the essence of technology must harbor in itself the growth of the saving power. So he asks on page 29, therefore we must consider now in advance in what respect the saving power does most profoundly take root and thence thrive even in that wherein the extreme danger lies. And again, he's going to say something about art, but that's not until the very, very end. He says, the granting that sends in one way or another into revealing is as such the saving power. The granting that sends in one way or another into revealing, so we're granting something, is the saving power. For the saving power lets man see and enter into the highest dignity of his essence. It is precisely an enframing which threatens to sweep man away into the ordering as the supposed single way of revealing. He says on page 33 that the essence of technology is in a lofty sense ambiguous. And he says a little later, on the other hand, oh, okay, so, well, we'll start on one hand, start on the first hand of the ambiguity. On the one hand, enframing challenges forth into the frenziedness of ordering that blocks every view into the coming to pass of revealing, and so radically endangers the relation to the essence of truth. On the other hand, enframing comes to pass for its part in the granting that lets man endure, as yet unexperienced, but perhaps more experienced in the future, that he may be the one who is needed and used for the safekeeping of the coming to the presence of truth. So we have a role, and so we have a responsibility in our power to pay attention to the direction in technology that we are taking technology. Because he says, we look into the danger and see the growth of the saving power. This includes holding always before our eyes the extreme danger. So he says, once that revealing that brings forth truth into the splendor of radiant appearing was also called Techne. So he's talking about Techne again at the end. And then this is almost the end. Okay, so here we go. And now he he talks about the connection of art and Techne. We have received. We have sorry, I have 10 minutes. Okay. I'm not going to try to find the right word. He says, and art was simply called Techne. Art was called Techne. That is the connection. It's in the language. He asks, why did art bear the modest name Techne in the past? He said, in Greece, at the outset of the destiny of the West, the arts soared to the supreme height of the revealing granted them. They brought the presence of the gods, brought the dialogue of the divine and human destinies to radiance. It was a single manifold revealing. It was pious, yielding to the holding sway and the safekeeping of truth. So he says, because it was a revealing that brought forth and hither and therefore belonged, because it was a revealing that brought forth and hither, therefore it belonged with poesis. And he says, I think from Holderlin again, maybe, oh, okay, yes. But where danger is, grows the saving power also. Poetically dwells man upon this earth. So the poetical brings the true into the splendor of what Plato in the Phaedrus calls to ekphanisdaton, that which shines forth most purely. The poetical thoroughly pervades every art, every revealing of coming to presence into the beautiful. Could it be that the fine arts are called to poetic revealing? So we shouldn't take arts out of school, kids. So could it be that revealing that lays claim to the arts most primally, so that they are, for their part, may expressly foster the growth of the saving power, may awaken and found anew our look into that which grants and our trust in it? Whether art may be granted this highest possibility of its essence in the midst of the extreme danger, no one can tell. Yet we can be astounded. Before what? Before this other possibility, that the frenziedness of technology may entrench itself everywhere to such an extent that someday throughout everything technological, the essence of technology may come to presence in the coming to pass of truth. Because the essence of technology is nothing technological, essential reflection upon technology and decisive confrontation with it must happen in a realm that is, on one hand, akin to the essence of technology, and on the other, fundamentally different from it. Such a realm is art, but certainly only if reflection on art for its part does not shut its eyes to the constellation of truth after which we are questioning. Thus questioning, we bear witness to the crisis that in our sheer preoccupation with technology, we do not yet experience the coming to presence of technology, that in our sheer aesthetic mindedness, we no longer guard and preserve the coming to presence of art. Yet the more questioningly we ponder the essence of technology, the more mysterious the essence of art becomes. The closer we come to the danger, the more brightly do the ways into the saving power begin to shine, and the more questioning we become. For questioning is the piety of thought. So it's not too late, because in the darkest night, we can see the dawn, the coming of the dawn, the light, whatever that is. It's not too late. All right, so that's pretty much it. I know I really didn't get into the origin of the work of art too much, so I'm glad that I got to refer to it in the beginning. And I would suggest, the book that I have. So the books that I have, The Question Concerning Technology and Other Essays. So it's the first essay in that one, and then Poetry, Language, Thought. It's the first essay in this book. And also there's poetry. Heidegger wrote poetry. All right, thank you all. I hope that you also watch and listen to the conversation that I have with Chris Satoor that I'm about to have later today, that I will post the following week, just because I think he is a scholar of German idealism, and from whence Heidegger has emerged. And I would say that he has a lot to teach us, myself included. So I think he'll have so much to add to this, and hopefully I won't just repeat what I said here. I'm sure that I won't remember any of it. All right. Thank you so much for listening, whether on the podcast or YouTube. And yeah, I'll catch you for the next video that is a conversation.